In the summer of 1982, London's financial district buzzed with an extraordinary discovery that would shake the foundations of international banking. Hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge, the body of Roberto Calvi, chairman of Italy's largest private bank, swayed in the Thames tide with bricks stuffed in his pockets and a noose around his neck. The man once hailed as God's banker for his intimate connections with the Vatican had met a mysterious end that perfectly encapsulated the web of corruption, murder, and financial manipulation that had consumed Banco Ambrosiano. What authorities initially ruled a suicide would later be revealed as murder, the final chapter in a saga that intertwined the Holy See, secret Masonic lodges, and the mafia in one of history's most spectacular banking frauds. Banco Ambrosiano's story began far more humbly in 1896, founded by Giuseppe Tovini as a Catholic institution dedicated to serving the faithful of Milan. Named after Saint Ambrose, the patron saint of Milan, the bank operated under strict Catholic principles, requiring clients to provide certificates of baptism and good conduct from their parish priests. For decades, it remained a modest regional institution, financing Catholic businesses and maintaining the conservative values its founder had envisioned. The bank's charter explicitly prohibited lending to non-Catholics and maintained close ties with the Vatican, a relationship that would prove both its greatest asset and ultimate destruction. By the 1960s, Banco Ambrosiano had grown to become Italy's largest private bank, boasting assets that rivaled state institutions and maintaining an impeccable reputation built on its Catholic foundations and conservative management practices. The transformation from respectable Catholic bank to international scandal began in 1971 when Roberto Calvi ascended to the bank's leadership. A brilliant but ruthlessly ambitious financier, Calvi immediately began expanding Ambrosiano's operations far beyond its traditional boundaries. He established a network of shell companies across Latin America, particularly in Panama and Nicaragua, using these entities to circumvent Italian banking regulations and hide massive fraudulent transactions. Through companies with names like Manic S.A., Bellatrix S.A., and Starfield S.A., Calvi funneled billions of lire into unauthorized investments and personal accounts. His most audacious creation was the Banco Ambrosiano holdings in Luxembourg, which became the primary vehicle for laundering money and conducting illegal operations. By 1981, this offshore network had grown to encompass over 40 shell companies spread across 8 countries, creating a labyrinthine financial structure that regulators struggled to penetrate. Central to Calvi's grand scheme was his partnership with the Institute for the Works of Religion, better known as the Vatican Bank. Through Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, an American-born prelate who headed the Vatican's financial operations, Calvi gained access to the unique privileges afforded to the Holy See. The Vatican Bank's status as a sovereign entity meant it operated outside normal banking regulations, making it the perfect conduit for Calvi's increasingly desperate financial manipulations. Marcinkus, a towering figure who had served as Pope Paul VI's bodyguard and was known for his business acumen, provided letters of comfort guaranteeing loans made by Ambrosiano's subsidiaries. These letters, while not legally binding, carried the implicit backing of the Vatican and allowed Calvi to secure hundreds of millions of dollars in credit. The relationship proved mutually beneficial initially, with the Vatican Bank earning substantial fees for its services, while Calvi gained legitimacy and access to international capital markets previously beyond his reach. The corruption surrounding Banco Ambrosiano extended deep into Italy's shadowy political underworld through the infamous P2 Masonic Lodge. Propaganda Due, as it was formerly known, operated as a secret society within Italian Freemasonry, boasting a membership that read like a who's who of Italian power brokers. Led by the charismatic and sinister Licio Gelli, P2 counted among its ranks cabinet ministers, military commanders, intelligence chiefs, industrialists, and journalists. Calvi's membership in this clandestine organization provided him with protection from regulatory oversight and access to insider information that proved invaluable to his fraudulent operations. The lodge's influence reached into the highest levels of government, with members strategically placed to suppress investigations, manipulate media coverage, and provide advance warning of regulatory actions. When Italian authorities finally raided Gelli's villa in 1981, they discovered membership lists that revealed the staggering extent of P2's penetration into Italian institutions, triggering a political crisis that toppled the government and exposed the corrupt network that had enabled Ambrosiano's fraudulent operations. As Calvi's empire expanded, so did his entanglements with organized crime, particularly through his relationship with Michel Sindona, another prominent banker with extensive mafia connections. Sindona, who had previously faced his own banking scandal and eventual murder in prison, served as Calvi's mentor and introduction to the dark world of money laundering for criminal organizations. Through Sindona's network, Banco Ambrosiano became a conduit for washing drug money from the Sicilian mafia and other criminal enterprises, with funds flowing through the bank's South American subsidiaries before emerging as legitimate investments. The mafia connection proved both lucrative and dangerous, providing Calvi with access to enormous amounts of capital while making him increasingly dependent on criminal organizations that brooked no betrayal. Intelligence reports later revealed that Calvi had been laundering money for the Corleonesi clan, one of Sicily's most powerful and violent mafia families, creating obligations that would ultimately cost him his life. The House of Cards began collapsing in 1981 when Italian banking regulators finally penetrated the maze of shell companies and discovered massive holes in Ambrosiano's books. Bank of Italy inspectors found that over $1 billion had simply vanished, siphoned off through fraudulent loans to companies that existed only on paper. The investigation revealed that Calvi had been using depositors' money to prop up his own investments, engaging in a massive Ponzi scheme that had continued for over a decade. When regulators demanded explanations for the missing funds, Calvi pointed to the Vatican Bank's letters of comfort, claiming the Holy See had guaranteed the loans. However, Archbishop Marcinkus denied any responsibility, insisting the letters were merely expressions of good faith rather than binding guarantees. This denial left Ambrosiano exposed to losses it could never cover, triggering a liquidity crisis that threatened to bring down Italy's entire banking system. As pressure mounted from regulators, prosecutors, and increasingly desperate creditors, Calvi's behavior became erratic and paranoid. He spoke frequently of threats against his life and began varying his routine to avoid potential assassins. In May 1982, Italian authorities convicted Calvi of illegal currency export and sentenced him to 4 years in prison, though he remained free pending appeal. Facing imminent arrest and growing pressure from mafia associates demanding their money, Calvi made a desperate attempt to save himself by threatening to expose the entire network of corruption that had enabled his crimes. He compiled detailed dossiers on his relationships with Vatican officials, P2 members, and mafia figures, apparently hoping to use this information as leverage for protection. On June 10, 1982, Calvi disappeared from his Rome apartment, leaving behind a letter of resignation as chairman of Banco Ambrosiano and beginning a journey that would end with his death beneath Blackfriars Bridge. The discovery of Calvi's body on June 18, 1982, sent shockwaves through international financial markets and triggered one of the largest banking investigations in history. Initially ruled a suicide by London authorities, the circumstances of his death raised immediate questions that would persist for decades. The bricks in his pockets weighed exactly enough to ensure drowning, while the location beneath Blackfriars Bridge was seen as symbolically significant, given the connection between Blackfriars and the enemies of Freemasonry. Forensic evidence later revealed that Calvi could not have tied the complex knots found on the noose, and the absence of rust or paint from the bridge on his clothing suggested he had been hanged elsewhere before being placed beneath the span. In 2002, Italian prosecutors finally charged 5 individuals with Calvi's murder, including members of the Corleonesi mafia clan and a notorious Roman criminal named Flavio Carboni, who had been among the last people to see Calvi alive. The collapse of Banco Ambrosiano sent tremors throughout the global financial system and exposed the dangerous interconnections between legitimate banking, organized crime, and political corruption. Italian authorities liquidated the bank in August 1982, leaving creditors with losses exceeding $1.3 billion and thousands of small depositors facing financial ruin. The Vatican, while denying legal responsibility, eventually agreed to pay $244 million to Ambrosiano's creditors as a gesture of good faith, though this amount represented only a fraction of the total losses. Archbishop Marcinkus became the subject of an Italian arrest warrant, but remained safely within Vatican City, protected by the Holy See's sovereign immunity until his quiet transfer to an Arizona parish in 1990. The scandal triggered major reforms in international banking regulations and led to increased scrutiny of offshore financial centers that had enabled Calvi's fraudulent operations. More than 4 decades later, Banco Ambrosiano stands as a cautionary tale of how the corruption of financial institutions can threaten the stability of entire economic systems, while the mysterious circumstances of Roberto Calvi's death continue to symbolize the deadly consequences of crossing the shadowy networks that operate at the intersection of money, power, and violence.